Hello and welcome back to another video today here again on Gran Turismo 7 to test out and compare the three starter cars. So there are three starter cars suggested by the game, although admittedly with the 25th anniversary edition extra credits, which I could have bought, well, any of the other cars in the used car dealer to begin with. You do, however, have to collect all of these cars, so it probably is worth going for one of them, and that is kind of what you're expected and supposed to do. So I am going to give you an idea of which one is best. You do win the other two pretty soon at the start anyway, so to be honest it doesn't really matter, so this is just a bit of a fun comparison of the three basic little Japanese cars that you get given at the beginning. All are front-wheel drive, small hatchbacks, and rather strangely they all weigh exactly 1,080 kilograms. The one I went for first was this Mazda Demio, but let's take a look at all three cars before we get going, seeing which is best. So, first up is the Mazda Demio from 2015. It's got a turbocharged 1498cc engine, and it's just about the biggest engine over the other two. It produces 102 horsepower, comes in at 310.94 performance points, and costs 12,500 credits at the used car dealer at the beginning of the game. The second option is the Toyota Aqua S from 2011, making it the oldest of the three. It has a naturally aspirated 1496cc engine, so 2cc smaller than the Mazda, produces 120 horsepower, and comes in at 349.25 performance points, making it the highest performance points of the three. So according to that system, this is the best car. And it's also the most expensive, despite being the oldest, at 14,300 credits. Third up is the Honda Fit Hybrid from 2014, with a naturally aspirated 1496cc engine, exactly the same size as the Toyota Aqua, but producing 138 horsepower, making it the most powerful of the three. And with all of them weighing the same, supposedly that should make this the best. Although according to the performance point system this sits at 328.06, which is down on the Toyota Aqua. So on paper it's the best on the power to weight ratio, but in terms of performance points the Aqua is the best on paper, and this comes in at the middle of the other two at 13,000 credits. So, for the purposes of this comparison, I've picked the Brands Hatch Indy circuit for a couple of reasons. Partly because I haven't unlocked a load of tracks, and this is one of the ones I'm most familiar with, and partly because this is one of the tracks you will be driving quite a bit of early on in the game. But as with Forza reviews, which you might have seen, but if you're not familiar with them, basically I'm going to take the Mazda for 5 laps around here, like I do on that game, and, well, give the fastest time, basically, as I'm going to do with the other cars. Taking the Mazda first because I'm most familiar with it, and then we'll be taking the Aqua and the Fit Hybrid around. But yeah, it felt quite nice to drive. I did take a lightly modified Mini around first, which actually handled a lot better. It was similar PP, to this. I'm going to keep doing that because Forza. But yeah, the little diesel Mazda wasn't too bad, just had a bit more understeer and felt a bit heavier than the Mini. One problem I did have, because for some reason in Gran Turismo I feel more comfortable using interior cam, although I am also on controller on here like I am on Forza. One thing I did notice was the A-pillar was quite irritating. It was really hard to see where the apex was. That might have just been because I was in a Mini before, which has much better visibility. But anyway, as we round the final corner and go across the line, I can tell you the fastest time was a 104.775. My slowest was a 106 something, we averaged 105 middling. But 104.775 is what's going to go down as its fastest time. Let's see what the Toyota can do. So, next up is the Toyota Aqua. Now I should point out that Brands Hatch is set to the same time of day for all of these. It's set to noon, which for some reason Gran Turismo thinks is 1 PM. But anyway, that aside, here goes the fastest lap that I set in the Toyota Aqua. So this car had only an automatic transmission. You can't set it to manual, although I've got it set to manual if you see what I mean. And it's also a hybrid, so it kind of felt slower than the Mazda's little diesel engine, but I did find the understeer quite incredibly bad. I don't know if it was just because I was approaching corners at a higher speed. The sense of speed was kind of lower because it's not as noisy as the little Mazda's diesel, so I think I was just kind of approaching the corners quite fast, not realising the speed I was doing, but I did eventually get used to it and started lapping faster and faster. The visibility was slightly better in this than it was in the Demio, But yeah, the understeer was quite hard to deal with, and I don't think I really set a very good lap. But despite that, my fastest time was a 1:03.2, so a second and a half faster than a Mazda, which makes sense based on the PP number, although I'm hoping it's not just because I've gone round more times. I did practice in a Mini first as we go across the line. So that's the fastest so far. Let's see how the Honda does. And last up is the Honda Fit hybrid. Sorry, the Toyota was the last car. I should also point out that all three cars, although the Mazda was the only one I'd driven previously, all of their engine oil condition things were all showing as excellent still. I can't actually change them yet because I haven't unlocked GT Auto at this point. But anyway, the Honda Fit hybrid did have the option of manual gears, unlike the Aqua, and handled a lot better. This and the Mazda were both nice to drive. I really didn't like driving that Toyota Aqua, despite it having more power and supposedly, well, not more power than this, but supposedly being the fastest on the performance points system. But this kind of felt like it had the go of that on the straights, but had the handling of the Mazda at the same time. So this did feel quite good. This kind of felt to me like it would be faster. Did also have weird visibility because there's kind of two A-pillars for some reason, so you're kind of looking between them. But anyway, it didn't do too badly. The Honda ended up doing a 1:04.208 as its best time, so half a second faster than the Mazda, but still a second slower than the Toyota, which I found hard to believe. So the Toyota is the fastest, as the performance point number might have suggested, but strangely this wasn't, because I thought this would be quite good. So rather unsurprisingly, the car with the highest performance point number, the Toyota Aqua S, is the fastest, despite it being, well, I thought the worst to drive. Really didn't enjoy driving this one, but it is, I think, essentially underneath quite similar to a Prius, which would kind of explain things. A Mazda was probably my favourite with its little diesel engine, but the Honda also handled well and was quite quick. But yeah, the car with the highest performance points was rather unsurprisingly the fastest when they were stock. But now, what happens if we upgrade them to a similar PP number, because you probably can't get them exactly the same with all the decimal points and everything, and then take them around again? So, after the upgrades, I'm going to quickly take you through the stats of all three cars. I ended up upgrading them to near as makes no difference 430 performance points, which seems a bit random. I was originally going to go for 500 because some of them, or one of them, started at nearly 400 already, but that was a bit of a stretch. It was going to cost a lot and take a lot of upgrading, which realistically you're not going to be doing straight away at the start of the game anyway. So yeah, that was kind of a number I settled for. It was a bit of a fiddle balancing all three of them to that. But anyway, we've ended up with the Mazda here having 125 horsepower, 928 kilograms, 430.71 performance points to be exact. The only problem we have with the Mazda is because I've driven it more, it's now in normal condition on all of the parts, and I don't have GT Auto yet, so we can't fix that, so it might be at a slight disadvantage because of that. The Toyota now has 125 horsepower, exactly the same as the Mazda, weighs a bit more at 993 kilograms, and comes in at 429.78 performance points to be exact. And the Honda is now the most powerful of the three at 152 horsepower, also weighing 993 kilos like the Toyota, and coming in at 430.35 performance points. Let's see how they all fare around Brands Hatch. So, first up is the little Mazda Demio out of the three. As before, they're all going to get 5 laps around, and I'm going to show you the best one here. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what makes the most difference, the power or the weight. Obviously, 2 of the cars have exactly the same horsepower number, 2 have exactly the same weight figure. The poor little Mazda might be at a disadvantage, simply because it's got all its engine and oil at normal condition rather than excellent, and I can't go and change it at this point. So it'll be interesting to see if that makes a difference as well. It will also be running first, but yeah, could be interesting to see how these things affect the cars anyway, and it's all a bit of fun at the end of the day, this comparison. One thing I did notice is I was amazed how much better it drove. The turn-in was incredible. I didn't feel like I'd upgraded the cars loads, but it was pretty impressive how much better it handled. Didn't feel loads faster on the straight, despite a bit extra power, but yeah, I was surprised by how much difference it made in terms of how the car felt to drive, and the time. The Mazda setting a 57-second .993 lap, so quite substantially faster than before. They were all kind of 103s and 104s before, so we've shaved about 7 seconds off those kind of times. Let's see what the second car, the Toyota, can do. So again, next up is the Toyota Aqua, again with 125 horsepower, exactly the same as the Mazda, but a bit heavier at 993 kilos. Let's see how it handles around here. It was definitely faster, but as it was when I drove it stock, it still felt horrible to drive, really. It felt very understeery, despite being on sport tyres, medium sport tyres, which I've put all 3 cars on. That's one of the mods I kept the same. That was actually the only lap that I didn't end up in the gravel on the first corner, my fastest lap. So yeah, although it's okay in the straights, the single drive gear, the feeling of understeer, and there's kind of, I think it's because there's no sense of speed because it's so quiet, that you kind of approach corners too quickly and the understeer feels more, but it definitely isn't nice to drive. It's absolutely miserable driving this car, so even if it is faster, I'm not going to recommend you use this thing. It's absolutely horrid. The other two being slightly preferable to drive, and yeah, I was right in its handling. It in fact sets a time of a 58.285, so yeah, only 0.3 slower, but it is slower, mostly because it was difficult to get a clean lap in. Anyway, let's see if the Honda can beat the Mazda. So, last and most definitely not least is the Honda Fit, the most powerful of the 3 after the upgrades, with 152 horsepower, weighs the same as the Toyota, but neither of these were much heavier than the Mazda's 928 kilos at 993 kilos. It was by far the nicest to drive after the upgrades, this, and I feel like the more laps I had with this, the faster and faster I would get. So it's easily the most confidence-inspiring of the 3, the Mazda being not that bad, and the Toyota being a bit, well, just dreadful to drive, really, despite being not a lot slower. But yeah, really enjoyed driving this, actually. Handled so well. But yeah, even with more power, it kind of felt better in the corners. I don't know why it was so much better than the other 2. Well, not loads better than the Mazda, but anyway, it did reasonably well. I was kind of expecting it to beat the Mazda, but in fact it did a 58.043, so very, very close. The Mazda only just tipped into the 57s with a 57.993, so this only just loses out to that, with the Toyota being a little way off. So, after comparing the cars stock and modified, I think I am going to have to come to the conclusion that the Honda is the best, which isn't what I was expecting. The Mazda was my favourite going into this, which is why I picked it. I think it's the best looking of the 3, and probably the most interesting of the 3, and I slightly prefer the diesel to the hybrid drivetrains. But yeah, the reason I'm going to say the Honda is the best is because, well, in the modified lap there was basically nothing in it between this and the Mazda, and I think given a couple more laps this would have been faster. I would have carried on getting faster in this, whereas in the Mazda I don't think I was quite confident enough in it to do so. So yeah, I think I am going to have to conclude this is the best, because it was also faster than the Mazda stock, and yes, it's more expensive, it's 500 credits more, but it's not a lot more. The Toyota I don't even want to really talk about here, because it's the most expensive. Yes, it was the fastest stock, but to be honest, you're not going to use it stock for that long. You are going to need to upgrade it or swap it out for some other car. So yeah, that was kind of, well, it was the worst once it was upgraded. It was absolutely appalling to drive, despite being quite fast stock. So really wouldn't recommend using that, and I don't want to drive it again, to be honest. The annoying drive gearbox and everything, and the understeer is just, I just didn't enjoy driving that car. Whereas the Honda, like I said, stock, this and the Mazda, it was kind of, I did quite like both of these, but modified, the Honda just had the edge on it, in terms of, well, driving being more enjoyable, which I didn't think I would ever say about a Honda Jazz, which is essentially what this Honda Fit is. The Mazda, of course, being a Mazda 2 in most parts of the world. But yeah, that is going to be my winner of the 3 starter cars, the little Honda Fit, which, yeah, is going to be the one I'm going to be using if I'm required to use a small, compact Japanese car for much more of the game, because, well, we're going to move on to faster things very soon. So yeah, that is my pick of those 3 starter cars. That's the one I think you should go for. Although, like I said at the beginning, the game's going to ask you to collect all 3, and you're going to win them as prize cars for the 3 first events you do. So you're very quickly going to have all 3 cars anyway. But this is the one I would put the money into modifying if I was you, if you want to get one slightly higher performance to compete against other stuff. For me, it's not necessarily worth it because I have the 25th anniversary edition, so I have much faster stuff already, if the regulations will allow me to use it for some of the races. But yeah, if you've got the standard version, I would recommend using the Honda more than the other 2, and maybe upgrading this one for some of the slightly faster racing. But there you go, just a fun little comparison of the 3 starter cars. I know it really doesn't matter that much in this game because you do get them all quite quickly. But that is going to be all for today's video, taking a first look at the 3 potential starting cars here on Gran Turismo 7. Do let me know if you've enjoyed this kind of comparison of 2 or 3 cars style video, because potentially we can pair some other cars up against each other at some point down the line, or just review some of them more individually here on Gran Turismo 7. But that is going to be all for today's video, so thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll be back with the next video very soon.